Hey, this is Lee Nevis, host of CJ and Cell. Thanks for listening to the following podcast on Public House Media.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, this is Josh Powers.
And I am John Moore.
And we're the hosts of The Cheap Seats, brought to you by Public House Media each and every Tuesday. We're here to talk sports.
And anything else you can think of that has to do with sports. Bottom line is, we are your conduit. We are fans just like you. We're talking about the stuff that we know that you're talking about around the water cooler.
Once you've finished listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media, we hope you'll come and check out our show, The Cheap Seats, every Tuesday on all of your favorite podcast platforms. You'll find us way up here in The Cheap Seats.
The latest headlines.
The Houston Astros, the defending World Series champions, got better adding Garrett Cole.
The insightful interviews.
Rick Saratella, NFL Draft Bible. With how much emphasis is put on the position, yet how many over the last couple of years we've had questions. Why do we put such an emphasis on drafting a quarterback number one overall?
The bottom line is there's not enough good quarterbacks to go around. And I think with the new CBA, it's really a low-risk gamble now. If you look at the playoff teams, the common denominator, good quarterback play.
The hottest takes.
I think the guy to blame is the one guy who hasn't left yet. I think Russell Westbrook is one of the bigger problems in Oklahoma City.
Can all be found on Press Row. Broadcasting is part of the Public House Media Network. Here's your host.
It doesn't matter what your name is.
Christian Heimall.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back on Press Row. Been a couple weeks, but happy to have you here with us on this Thursday, September 19th, 2019. Christian Heimall with you broadcasting, as always, as part of the Public House Media Network. You can find us on Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, as well as iHeartRadio, Google, and Apple Play. And, of course, the PublichouseMedia.org. PublichouseMedia.org has great stuff as well, some gear, some Press Row swag for you guys to go and check out and support the show as well. Got a fun episode for you guys today. Joe Pantorno, sports editor of Metro New York, is going to join us. The dumpster fire that is New York football, whether it be the Giants or the Jets. It seems as though all hope is lost for the boys of fall up there in the Big Apple. So we'll touch in on that in a little bit. We'll get to your listener questions as well. You can always submit them to us throughout the week via Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM. You can email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook at Press Row Podcast by Public House Media. Lot to dive into, obviously, and we'll get to it in just a little bit with regards to the situations up in New York. But I want to follow up with something that I thought was interesting with regards to this past. Listen, I'm going to touch on the Le'Veon Bell situation for just a very not Le'Veon Bell, an Antonio Brown situation for just a moment, because this is something that is so incredibly interesting in all of it. What this really has done has kind of set a precedent, and Le'Veon Bell is kind of a part of it, too, with how the Steelers acted. This has basically set a precedent for how to get out of certain contracts and just basically be a giant headache for all of these owners. And I'm not saying that this is going to be a continuous trend. I'm just saying we've finally reached the peak of divaism. I mean, it started out with, Michael Irvin and his off-the-field troubles. It was with Deion Sanders in the Atlanta Falcons when he was also playing for the Atlanta Braves and trying to play baseball and football both full-time. You go back to, of course, Keyshawn Johnson and his book, Throw Me the Damn Ball. You go back to Terrell Owens with his antics in Dallas, doing sit-ups in his driveway in Philadelphia, answering questions at a press conference. You go back to this, and it continues on down the line. Odell Beckham this offseason, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown multiple times. But there are a couple of things with this Antonio Brown situation that I don't think we're giving a lot of credence to. I think, truth be told, the biggest culprit behind all of this is Drew Rosenhaus, his agent. I think we have been given way too much power to these agents because they don't take the physical toll. They don't take the physical beating that their players do. They don't really care. Some of them do, trust me. And working in professional sports, I've known some agents, and they are great people. Even in collegiate sports, the agents for some of the coaches, they are great people. But most of them don't really care, especially at the biggest and highest level. You look at Drew Rosenhaus and some of his clients and just how much money he makes on a regular basis. He's got Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, Tyreek Hill. He had Chad Johnson. He had LaShawn McCoy. He had Plexico Burress, who was another one that had all of that. But you look at what he's done, and he's negotiated over $2 billion in NFL contracts alone. And it's insane to look at that, what he's been able to do. He also started to represent Johnny Manziel, but only did it if he went to rehab. But you look at these agents, and you look at how much power they have over what that player does and how he tries to get the most out of it. Now, it's a little different in the Antonio Brown situation because he left $30 million on the table to go play for the Patriots for 1 year. Granted, that was $30 million over 3 years, and now it's 15 over 1, so it's a little bit better here for Antonio Brown. But these agents get so far into the head of these players, and they're doing their job in convincing them that they're worth more money and trying to put them in a better situation to make more money. But at the same time, it's self-serving because the agent then makes more money based off of how much money the player makes, obviously. So I think we we don't really look just at how much influence a guy like Drew Rosenhaus has. Then, and I think this is the more important one to look at, you look at the Antonio Brown timeline of all of this, and it's very, very strange to see what's happened with him getting to this point. But I think it goes back to a really important moment that actually happened on the field with Le'Veon Bell, or excuse me, with Antonio Brown. When you look at what happened with Antonio Brown and the hit that he took from Vontaze Burfict, and when that happened, it is almost a completely different change in mentality. This was in 2015 in the wild card round against what happened against the Cincinnati Bengals. It's scary to look at it. January in 2016, when that happened, and then you start to look at where all of these things come from out of nowhere. He really was just one of those guys who was penalized for celebrations, doing what wide receivers do. Chad Johnson, Terrell Owens, Keyshawn Johnson, Joe Horn with the Saints. But then after that, it starts to turn a little bit, and Antonio Brown becomes a little bit more of an off-the-field problem, posting videos of locker room celebrations, posting videos in general of himself when he should be with the team. This whole feud with Ben Roethlisberger for him sitting out the regular season finale where they needed him in order to clinch a playoff spot. Him focusing so much more on himself, going on the show The Masked Singer, the Oakland Raiders, and trying to get traded out of Pittsburgh. And then the cryotherapy chamber where he ends up burning his feet, the grievance about his helmet, the fines where he, for missing practices, where he goes on social media and bashes his own team, where he gets into a verbal altercation and threatening to punch his own GM, then all of a sudden publicly apologizing and being excited to play football, and then getting released and wanting to be released and then going to the Patriots. I don't have any facts whatsoever about this, but I know that there are people in NFL circles that are wondering if the hit that Vontaze Burfict delivered on Antonio Brown in the wild card game, if that had, January 9th, 2016, if that had anything to do with any of this, and how much it may have seriously altered the chemical balance within his brain. And I don't know, we may never know if any of that, but Antonio Brown was just an on-the-field issue, both from, defensively trying to guard him, but then also, some of the actions that he had to now becoming what he is. And we're not going to get into the sexual allegation stuff and the fact that, he's technically a free man because the statute of limitations has surpassed. But part of me really does wonder how much that hit and the concussion that he suffered could have altered Antonio Brown and his mental state and changed his personality just a little bit. This could all just be him trying to get as most money as he can just before his career comes to an end. Who knows? He's been around, I believe, 7 years now, almost 10. Yeah, almost 10 years in the NFL. So who knows? His career may be coming to an end as well, and this may just be his way of getting as much money as he can before calling it quits. But it is something that I keep thinking about, and I know that there are some people in the NFL who are also wondering that. We may never know if that's true or not, but I think it's something that we're not really discussing much, is how much that hit could have altered the mental state of Antonio Brown, and just certainly hope for his sake that it didn't actually do anything, and this is just his personality, and he's kind of a nuisance for people and the truest diva in every sense of the word. But we may never know. It'll just be interesting to find out if we ever do. When we come back, we're going to shift gears and talk about the New York Jets and New York Giants, the dumpster fire that is the two New York City football teams, and just how to fix it all and where these two franchises go from here. Joe Pantorno, sports editor of Metro New York, he's going to join us in just a little bit. Your listener questions coming up as well. You're on Press Row, broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com.
What's up, everyone? Kevin McMahon here, play-by-play voice for the High Point Rockers and host of the Off the Rockers podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this broadcast on Public House Media. Once you finish, I hope you come check out my podcast, Off the Rockers. It's a weekly show all about the High Point Rockers professional baseball team in their inaugural season in the Atlantic League. Join me as I recap the latest happenings and preview the week to come, complete with interviews from players and coaches and a look around the Atlantic League. A new show drops every Monday. You can only hear it right here on Public House Media.
This is Press Row with Christian Heimall, a Public House Media podcast.
Welcome back on Press Row here on this Thursday, September 19th, 2019. Been a while since we've had a brand new show, but it's kind of hard to ignore when some of the biggest headlines come out of the biggest media market in the world. And as those of you who are fans of the show know, I'm a New York Giants fan, so it's hard not to talk about the New York Giants. And to help us with that, friend of the podcast, Joe Pantorno, sports editor at Metro New York, joins us. And Joe, the Giants have clearly fixed their defensive problems by benching quarterback Eli Manning for Daniel Jones.
Yeah, hi, Christian. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pretty remarkable day, benchmark day, really, in New York with the Giants' decision to bench Eli Manning for Daniel Jones. And obviously, it's an end of an era, and it's going to be a tough pill for a lot of Giants fans to swallow because I know in a few weeks there's going to come a time where a lot of them will be saying that they miss Eli Manning. But it's, management has found a way or kind of made it known that now's the time for the change in an attempt to salvage the season. And they hand the reins over to Jones, and we'll see what happens from here.
But truth be told, I mean, don't get me wrong. Jones had a great preseason. I don't think anybody can doubt that, and a talented individual. But are they trying to fix the wrong problem here? Because this is a defense that over the last 2 weeks, from a secondary standpoint, has been absolutely torched. So how does making a change at quarterback make this team better?
At this point, it doesn't. The Giants' secondary has been shambles, and the pass rush really hasn't done any favors for them. But it's because of that Daniel Jones is coming into a huge market as a starting quarterback for one of the most historic teams in the NFL, with as little pressure as possible. This is an 0-2 team. Expectations are really, they can't be any lower. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Week 3 aren't going to pose much of a threat offensively. We've seen the struggles of Jameis Winston. You still expect him to put up a good enough game where he's going to torch the Giants defense, because basically every game so far has suggested the Giants are susceptible. And really, Jones is going to come in here and, you know, the organization, the coaching staff, the fan base is going to say, okay, let's see what you got at this point. So are the Giants putting him in the best situation to win? No. Are they putting him in the best situation to find his bearings and kind of play under the radar and perform under the radar? In terms of speaking for a New York market, yeah.
Speaking with Joe Pantorno, sports editor of Metro New York, and before we get into kind of Daniel Jones, what to expect from him under center, you mentioned at the top an end of an era, but almost kind of a fitting end, considering how Eli Manning started as the New York Giants' premier quarterback, replacing Kurt Warner in what was a unsalvageable season, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, it's super similar. It's almost like a mirror image, really, how the Giants are doing this, even though the entire brass management has changed between the 15, 16 years. But the one thing is that the Giants really waited until about Week 10 to start Eli back in 2004. And that's a pretty sizable amount of time where Manning was able to be on the sidelines and take something to the Hall of Famer like Kurt Warner. We're talking about Week 3 here. And obviously it remains to be seen how much Daniel Jones really picked up from Eli. But just by looking kind of at the intangibles and expectations coming out of college from, say, Manning in 04 to Jones in 19, Manning was obviously the bigger prospect. He had the better skill set. I mean, people are calling Jones kind of a little bit bigger, obviously younger, more athletic version of Eli. So I guess at this point, Dave Gettleman could be kind of toying with desperation here. He could be hoping that lightning strikes twice, and the transition from Manning to Jones is a seamless one.
If you could, before we move on to the other New York football team, or New York City football team, I better be careful, otherwise Josh Allen will yell at me. If you could, try to sum up Eli Manning's career as a New York Giant and what he's meant to this franchise, to that city, and ultimately, his legacy as an NFL starter.
Yeah, I mean, what really can't be said about Eli Manning's tenure as the Giants starter? He's, in my mind, without a doubt, the greatest quarterback in Giants franchise history, by far and away. He holds the records for most passing yards and most passing touchdowns, and kind of set the stage for longevity and true professionalism in such a big market like New York. And really is as good as he was a quarterback on the field, and it's, you can't change my mind that he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, personally. But he was just as good a human off the field with his countless philanthropic efforts. He worked with countless charities. Really kind of was the walking epitomization of what it meant to be a New York Giant. And like I said a little bit earlier, Giants fans might not realize it now, but they're really going to miss this guy.
Couldn't agree with you more. We're speaking with Joe Pantorno of Metro New York. Let's switch on things over to Gang Green now. Monday night, a 23-3 debacle against the Cleveland Browns, a team that had so much promise coming into this year. Obviously, Sam Darnold getting sick doesn't help in that matter. But where did the Jets go from here after the loss Monday night?
It's really just all hands on deck for the Jets it's doom and gloom already. For a season where you're coming in with such high expectations, a total rebranding, a new head coach, a shiny new running back on Le'Veon Bell, Sam Darnold's supposed to take the next step, and really in a few weeks it's all gone down the tubes. And obviously Darnold battling mono right now. The offense was just overmatched. It looked like men against boys out there against the Cleveland Browns, and really after Monday night's game, most people around the team, obviously around the fan base, everybody's forecasting at least an 0-5 start, unless Darnold makes a miraculous recovery and he can come back sooner, even though there's really no set timetable. This could just be another typical Jets season where they're wallowing near the bottom of the AFC East and the Patriots are dominating.
You mentioned it with the Giants that Dave Gettleman is kind of going right after desperation here after week 2. Given the division that this team is in, given the uncertainty around Darnold's return, and if you talk to anybody with mono, it doesn't matter how healthy he is, he's going to lose a lot of kind of strength that he's going to have to get back before he can actually start playing. Is there any thought around the Jets organization at maybe trying to trade for a quarterback or bring in somebody else?
At the time, they're kind of still reeling from the fact that they're losing Trevor Siemian for the season. That ankle injury he sustained when he got hit by Myles Garrett basically leaves a rookie in Luke Falk as their number one starter. So something has to be done. Obviously, you can't just go in with him. I believe right now on the depth chart, the team's current backup quarterback with Siemian out is Le'Veon Bell. That's obviously just not going to cut it. And I know Bell can make all the plays, but that's just a little ridiculous. So a trade is definitely an option. You do obviously have to look at the free agent market. I actually wrote a piece earlier today that it's time for somebody, and it might just be the Jets, where you might have to take a long, hard look at Colin Kaepernick. And I'm not saying that he has to come in and he has to star, but they just need an arm right now to hold the fort down until Darnold returns. Because right now, this team's not beating anybody.
100%. I was going to bring up Colin, but your piece kind of really lays out all the facts for it, especially in that division. So let me ask you this before I let you go here, Joe. We knew what the answer was going into the season, but now considering where both New York franchises are at week 3, which of these two teams do you think has the most wins coming into the season?
Yeah, see, that's tough. If Sam Darnold can come back, if he can come back within the next 3 to 4 weeks, I'll still say the Jets. This defense, really, week 1, I loved what I saw from the defense until C.J. Mosley got out injured. And then, obviously, they blew a 16-point lead to the Buffalo Bills. And for large portions of Monday night's game, they held tough. That's an explosive offense in Cleveland, even though that they're still gelling. Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, David Njoku, they were still able to keep them in check, and for a large portion of the game, they kept the offense in it. So even if whether Darnold comes back healthy or if they can find a suitable replacement while he recovers, I still think the Jets will have a better record than the Giants, unless Daniel Jones can come in and he comes in like gangbusters. I really can't see the Giants winning more than 4 or 5 games right now. I originally had them at 5-11 coming into the season, and now that I've seen the first 2 weeks, I actually might have been a little too generous. But we'll see how Daniel Jones does, and maybe he can turn that around for them.
Joe Pantorno, sports editor of Metro New York. As always, Joe, we appreciate the time. Thanks a lot, my friend.
Oh, of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast Public House Media, or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Press Row PHM. You can also email the program, pressrowphm@gmail.com.
This is Jenna Burt. host of the Confessions of a Military Spouse podcast here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Confessions of a Military Spouse, where we dig deep and talk about the unspoken hard truths of what it's really like to be a military spouse. A new show comes out bi-weekly. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Confessions of a Military Spouse. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Press Row with Christian Heimall, a Public House Media podcast.
Welcome back on Press Row as we wrap up shop here on this Thursday, September 19th. Christian Heimall here with you. Big thanks to Joe Pantorno of Metro New York for joining us here talking about our New York football Giants and Jets here on Press Row. And we'll start there with your listener questions. As always, you can submit them on Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM. You can email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook, Press Row Podcast by Public House Media. Mike in New Jersey asking, is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer? And yes, it's not even a question. I fully agree with Joe when he says he thinks Eli is a first ballot Hall of Famer. When you look at him, as long as he doesn't really just go terrible, and if he plays somewhere else and becomes terrible, it's a no-brainer in my opinion. Look, I get it. He's got a 500 overall record, but you know what? He has been one of the greatest, most consistent quarterbacks over the last 15 years. 2 Super Bowl wins, 2 Super Bowl MVPs. He ranks 6th all-time in completions with 4,860. 7th in yards, over 56,000. 8th in touchdowns, 362. He started all 16 games 13 different times, and he's been one of the most important things. Again, Super Bowl MVP twice, as well as being in the top 10 in completions, yards, and touchdowns. It's a no-brainer. The other part that makes this a no-brainer, the 116 overall, the fact that he's one of the most interceptions, and he's only had 7 winning seasons, I get it. But you know what? When it comes down to it, the numbers are there. The 2 Super Bowl MVPs, one of them being against the greatest team ever assembled, the 18-0 at that time, Super Bowl, juggernaut New England Patriots. To beat Tom Brady and Bill Belichick twice puts you over the edge in my book. You can be 116, but you know what? There are some guys in the Hall of Fame that do not have winning records, and it's really kind of intriguing to look at some of these quarterbacks and what they haven't done. You look at the guys who haven't won a Super Bowl. You look at the guys who never even played in a Super Bowl. It's incredible to look at. But here's the thing. Joe Thomas is going to be a Hall of Famer, a center. And don't get me wrong, I know it's a different position, but in 11 years, he's had 48 wins and 128 losses in 11 years. Eli Manning has been the staple of one of the most prestigious franchises in the history of sports, let alone the NFL. Won 2 Super Bowls, won 2 Super Bowl MVPs, and did it against Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, and the mighty New England Patriots both times. He's a no-brainer Hall of Famer. Whether he's a first ballot will be up to the judges and the voters to decide, but for me personally, Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer. And when you're the greatest quarterback in the history of one of the greatest organizations in the history of the game, you're a Hall of Famer. It's not even a question in my book. All right, here we go. Max in Maryland wanting to know, how does states setting up legislature for college athletes to be paid clash when the NCAA still doesn't allow it? Look, this is going to be interesting. And if you haven't been following this, California passed a bill last week, 39-0 in the California State Senate, to allow collegiate athletes in the state of California to hire agents and sign endorsement deals. New York State just announced yesterday on Wednesday that they are going there was a senator who proposed a bill to allow these college athletes to get paid. So it's starting to set up a really interesting legal battle. And I think what you're going to see, it's not going to happen soon. It's going to be a long, drawn-out process. But what I do ultimately think will happen is that you will see a victory for collegiate athletes. I don't think they're going to be paid necessarily the way that we assume, like in terms of getting contracts and in terms of, that being a part of the recruiting tactic is, hey, listen, LSU's offering, 18,000, we're going to offer you 25, whatever it is. But I do think what you will see is the NCAA bend and allow the kind of bill that California has set up to go through and be a legalized thing. Where basically, again, you are allowed to hire an agent and sign an endorsement deal. It will severely change the landscape of how you recruit, and it will only make the rich richer, in my opinion. It doesn't make the competitive balance any better, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm personally against collegiate athletes being paid in general, because the ones that have a higher operating budget who already, like Clemson and Alabama and Notre Dame and UCLA and Oregon and Auburn and Texas, who end up with these marketing deals and make so much money because of their connections with Reebok or Nike or Adidas or Under Armour, those boosters are going to be able to give more money to be able to pay the athletes better. It's not going to be a good look. Not to mention the fact that schools like UCLA and USC, as well as schools in the New York market, bigger media markets, could maybe get better endorsement deals if you go there. It changes the landscape of it, and I don't think it's a good thing for college athletics. Do I think they should get something more than what they are currently getting, and the NCAA needs to lessen their restrictions a little bit? Yes, I do believe that. But to go out and just straight say that these kids should be getting paid on top of, free or heavily discounted education, not so much. I think, what really needs to happen more than anything else is the NCAA needs to look at restricting and the regulations as to how some of these people end up, being able to give this much money to schools, because that's where a lot of it comes from, and how much money can actually be given to an athletic program. To me, as of right now, athletic programs are what, super PACs on the political side of things were. Now you have the ability to give as much money as you want. You have no idea who it's going to, what it's going to. There's no regulation on that. It's the wild, wild west with boosters and alumni given to their athletic programs. But if you limit the amount of money that's given to an athletic program yearly and you limit where it goes, that's how you get competitive balance. That's how you get this, quote, fair play act in collegiate athletics to work. So it's going to set up a long, drawn-out case. I do think ultimately it ends with collegiate players being able to sign agents and be able to make money off of sponsorship opportunities and autograph signings. But I don't know if that's a good thing for college athletics. All right, last one here coming from Joseph up in New York. Is Pete Alonso have a real chance at NL MVP? No, honestly. He's a runaway rookie of the year. It's not even close in my mind. But there are 5 guys ahead of him, in my opinion. Maybe 4, depending on your thought process here. But there are a number of guys who are just so good right now in the National League. Pete Alonso's numbers are stupid. Don't get me wrong. 48 home runs, 111 RBI, but he's hitting just 264. His on-base percentage is 362. He does still strike out quite a bit this year. But when you look at the guys ahead of him, in my opinion, as some of the guys who are going to really, really make it's a 4-horse race, in my opinion. Anthony Rendon leads the league in batting average at 330. Not only that, but he leads the league in RBIs with 119, and he is in the top 10 in home runs, he's in the top 15 in home runs with 34 this year. Not to mention, he plays on a Nationals team that is actually competing and probably going to make the playoffs. Rendon's second in the league in on-base percentage. He is also third in the league in slugging. The only 2 guys ahead of him are the 2 guys that I think it's really between, Cody Bellinger and Christian Yelich. Yelich obviously out for the rest of the year with that injury, but Yelich slashing 329, 429, and 671, leading the league in both on-base percentage and slugging, not to mention the fact his 97 RBI, his 44 home runs, and his incredible 329 batting average, which is second, as we mentioned, to Rendon. And, of course, he's the reigning MVP. That certainly helps a little bit. Then you go to Cody Bellinger, and you look at what he's doing, And Bellinger being one of those guys, third in the league in home runs with 44. He is in the top 10, seventh in RBIs with 109. He is right up there in terms of batting average as well with a 304, on-base percentage of 408, slugging .625. He also, on a dominant team, plays great defense in the outfield, better defense than Christian Yelich in the outfield as well. There are two other dudes that I think could maybe slide in there. Nolan Arenado, 40 home runs, 117 RBIs, and a 313 average. And then Freddie Freeman for the Braves, 38 home runs, 117 RBIs, and a 301 batting average. So there are 5 dudes that I think are ahead of Pete Alonso in the vote, but Mets fans should be very, very excited about the future of Pete Alonso and of their Mets with Michael Conforto and Jeff McNeil and some of these other younger guys. And if they can keep that pitching staff together, and if Brody Van Wagenen knows what he's doing, and maybe they get a manager who knows what he's doing and not Mickey Callaway, the Mets could be a very, very scary team in a very scary division in the National League East. That's going to do it for us on this episode of Press Row. Appreciate you guys listening. As always, you can tune in on Spreaker and Stitcher.com. You can find us on Apple and Google Play. You can also find us on iHeartRadio and, of course, publichousemedia.org. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, share us with your friends and family. Find us on social media as well. Twitter and Instagram handle @PressRowPHM. Email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com, or find us on Facebook, Press Row Podcast by Public House Media. Thanks to Joe Pantorno of Metro New York for joining us as well. I'm Christian Heimall. You can find me on Twitter @Chris Heimall, and I will see you next week on Press Row.